My name is Brad, and if you had met me 10 years ago, you would have said I was a lucky man. You would have seen a husband with a steady job, a quiet house, and a second chance at happiness. You would have been wrong. By the time I met Hannah, I had already buried one marriage. Divorce doesn't always explode like a bomb. Sometimes it dies inch by inch, through cold dinners, empty conversations, and two people who stop recognizing each other. When the papers were finally signed, I promised myself one thing. If I ever loved again, I would love completely. Then Hannah walked into my life. She was warm where I had become distant, patient where I had grown cynical. She laughed easily, and for the first time in years, I caught myself laughing too. She also came with 2 boys. Logan was 13. Ethan had just turned 11. I never saw them as baggage. I saw them as part of the woman I loved. People warned me. Being a stepfather isn't easy. They'll never see you as their dad. Don't give more than you're willing to lose. I smiled politely and ignored every warning. Love isn't supposed to keep score. At least, that's what I believed back then. When Hannah and I got married, I never tried to replace their biological father. That wasn't my goal. I simply showed up. Every single day. I drove them to football practice. I attended parent-teacher conferences. I sat through school concerts that lasted 2 hours just to hear each of them play for 3 minutes. When Logan got his driver's license, I helped him buy his first used pickup. When Ethan wanted to learn basic mechanics, I spent entire weekends in the garage teaching him how to change oil, replace brake pads, and diagnose simple engine problems. I thought those moments mattered. I thought memories built families. Years passed. The boys became young men. And with adulthood came problems. Lots of them. Logan couldn't keep a job for more than a few months. Every employer was unfair. Every supervisor was an idiot. Every firing was somehow someone else's fault. Ethan wasn't much different. Traffic tickets. Speeding. Parking violations. A suspended license. Missed court dates. Every mistake somehow landed on my desk. Not literally. Financially. Emotionally. Practically. Whenever Logan wrecked another bumper, I paid the deductible. Whenever Ethan forgot to renew his insurance, I covered the penalties. When Logan couldn't afford rent because he'd spent his paycheck on weekends with friends, I quietly transferred money into his account before Hannah even knew there was a problem. When Ethan got into a fight outside a bar and spent the night in a holding cell, I was the one who answered the phone at 2:30 in the morning. I drove across town, signed paperwork, paid bail, drove him home. He slept the entire ride. I went straight to work without ever going to bed. Neither of them ever asked how tired I was. Whenever employers were about to fire them, I called people I knew. I asked for second chances. Sometimes third. Once, even a fourth. Every favor I had built over 30 years of working disappeared one phone call at a time. I kept believing things would change. They're still young, Hannah would say. They'll mature. I wanted to believe her. So I kept helping. Insurance premiums. Traffic fines. Lawyers. Mechanics. Towing companies. Credit card payments. Emergency loans that somehow were never repaid. I became the invisible foundation holding together lives that looked perfectly stable from the outside. Nobody noticed the foundation. They only noticed the house standing above it. And maybe that was my mistake. I made rescuing them look too easy. The more problems I solved, the less anyone noticed I was solving them. It became expected. Normal. Automatic. If Logan got into trouble, Brad would fix it. If Ethan needed money, Brad would handle it. If someone needed convincing, Brad would make the phone call. If another disaster happened, Brad would clean it up. Again. And again. And again. I never asked for applause. I never expected praise. But somewhere deep inside me, I believed they respected me. That illusion lasted until one Saturday afternoon. I had spent most of the day replacing Ethan's alternator because he couldn't afford the repair. My hands were black with grease. My back ached. I walked around the side of the garage looking for a missing wrench. That's when I heard voices. Logan. Ethan. 3 of their friends. They hadn't seen me. One of the friends laughed. So your stepdad actually paid for that? Logan snorted. Of course. Another friend shook his head. Man, that guy does everything for you. Ethan laughed. Not awkwardly. Not uncomfortably. Genuinely. Then Logan said the sentence that changed everything. He's just Mom's biggest mistake. The group exploded with laughter. Someone added, Seriously? Logan shrugged. He just keeps trying to buy a family that isn't his. More laughter. Ethan grinned. He thinks we're actually grateful. I stood there. Completely still. The wrench lay only a few feet away. I never picked it up. I didn't interrupt them. I didn't yell. I didn't slam the garage door. I simply listened until the laughter faded. Then I quietly walked back inside the house. No one knew I had heard. No one saw anything different. At dinner, I spoke normally. Asked about their day. Passed the potatoes. Smiled when appropriate. Even Hannah didn't notice. But something inside me had become perfectly still. Not angry. Not emotional. Just finished. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat alone in my office. I opened my notebook. For years, I had kept a list of every recurring payment connected to the boys. Insurance. Cell phones. Emergency credit card payments. Roadside assistance. Legal retainers. Mechanic accounts. Tow service memberships. The attorney who always seemed ready whenever one of them found trouble. Names. Numbers. Monthly payments. Years of quiet rescue. I stared at the pages for a long time. Then I closed the notebook. I didn't write a speech. I didn't prepare an argument. I didn't plan revenge. I made one simple decision. No more. No more lawyers. No more paying tickets. No more calling employers to save jobs they were determined to lose. No more picking them up from police stations. No more fixing cars destroyed through carelessness. No more cleaning up disasters created by grown men who laughed at the only person still protecting them. For the first time in years, their next mistake would belong entirely to them. And I wondered how long it would take before they noticed the safety net was gone. Days passed before the first wall cracked. It was Logan. It was always Logan first. He called me at 7:14 on a Tuesday morning. I remember the exact time because I was already in my truck, coffee cooling in the cup holder, engine running, ready for work. His name lit up my phone. For years, I answered immediately. That morning, I watched it ring. Then I let it die. 30 seconds later, it rang again. Then again. Then Hannah called. I answered her. Brad, she said, breathless. Logan needs you. There it was. The old sentence. The family alarm bell. Logan needs you. Not Logan messed up. Not Logan has to fix something. Logan needs you. I stared through the windshield at the pale morning sky. What happened? He skipped work again, Hannah said. His manager fired him. He says if you call Mr. Daniels, maybe you can explain things. You've talked to him before. I had. Twice. Once when Logan vanished for 3 days because he was stressed. Once when he showed up drunk enough that everyone noticed. Both times, I swallowed my pride and asked another grown man to treat Logan like a boy who still had room to learn. Not this time. I'm not calling, I said. Silence. Then Hannah's voice sharpened. What do you mean you're not calling? I mean Logan can speak for himself. He's upset. He should be. That's cruel. No, I said quietly. That's adulthood. She hung up on me. I drove to work with both hands on the wheel and a strange emptiness in my chest. Not guilt. Not satisfaction. Something colder. Relief. By noon, Ethan's disaster arrived. A tow company called the house first, then Hannah, then me. His car had been found half in a ditch outside a liquor store, front end crushed, radiator bleeding onto the asphalt. He was fine. The car wasn't. The officer said Ethan claimed another driver cut him off. The witness said Ethan was speeding. The insurance company said the policy had lapsed 3 weeks earlier. Of course it had. Because I had stopped paying it. By evening, the house was vibrating with panic. Logan sat at the kitchen table, unemployed, furious, scrolling through his phone like rage could reopen his job. Ethan paced near the back door, face pale, talking about repairs he couldn't afford and debt he didn't understand. Hannah stood between them, phone in hand, trying to answer everyone. Banks. Creditors. The tow yard. The police department. The mechanic. Logan's former employer. People I had quietly handled for years were now spilling into the house like floodwater. And for the first time, I did not grab a bucket. I sat in the living room. I listened. That was all. Hannah came to me after the third call, eyes hard. Are you really going to sit there? I looked up. Yes. These are my sons. I know. They're your family. I folded my hands together. Family doesn't laugh behind your back and call you a mistake. Her face changed. Just a flicker. Enough to tell me she knew. Maybe not the exact words. But she knew the shape of them. What are you talking about? I told her. Every word. The garage. The friends. The laughter. Mom's biggest mistake. Buying a family that wasn't his. He thinks we're grateful. By the time I finished, Hannah had gone still. But she didn't comfort me. That hurt more than I expected. She looked toward the kitchen, where her sons were arguing over whose problem was worse, then back at me. They were being stupid, she whispered. No, I said. They were being honest. They didn't mean it. They meant it enough to say it when they thought I couldn't hear. Her eyes filled, but not with apology. With fear. Because suddenly this wasn't about hurt feelings. It was about money. Protection. Survival. The machine had stopped running, and everyone wanted to know why the lights were flickering. Logan stormed in first. You seriously won't call Daniels? No. After everything? I almost laughed. After everything. The words belonged to me, but he wore them like a borrowed coat. You lost that job, I said. Not me. He was already looking for a reason. You gave him one. Ethan stepped in behind him, jaw tight. And what about my car? What about it? I need it fixed. Then fix it. With what money? I looked at him for a long moment. The boy I had taught to change oil. The boy whose first toolbox I bought. The boy who laughed while I stood 10 feet away with grease under my nails. I don't know, I said. His mouth opened. Closed. He wasn't used to that answer. None of them were. Hannah put a hand over her forehead. Brad, please. This is too much at once. No, I said. This is what it always was. You're just hearing the phones now. That stopped her. For years, she had slept through the fires because I woke up first. She never heard the officers on the line at 2 in the morning. She never saw the collection notices before I paid them. She never watched me sit in parking lots outside police stations, waiting with my stomach twisted into knots, wondering which son would walk out ashamed and which would walk out annoyed. She saw the clean version. The repaired version. The version I handed back to her after I had absorbed the damage. Now the damage had nowhere to go. So it filled the house. The next few days were ugly. Logan borrowed money from friends, then avoided their calls. Ethan argued with the tow yard until they added storage fees. Hannah's phone rang so often she started flinching whenever it lit up. At night, she sat at the kitchen table surrounded by papers, rubbing her temples. I recognized the posture. It had been mine for years. One evening, she looked at me across the table and said nothing. There was no anger left in her face. Only exhaustion. And something like understanding. "You really handled all of this?" she asked. I didn't answer right away. Outside, the porch light flickered against the dark window. I could see my reflection there, older than I felt, tired in ways sleep could never repair. "Yes," I said. She swallowed. "For how long?" I looked toward the hallway, where Logan's door was closed, where Ethan's music thumped faintly through the wall, where two grown men hid from consequences like children hiding from thunder. "Years." Hannah lowered her eyes. That was the first time she didn't defend them. It should have felt good. It didn't. Because realization is not the same as repair. And by then, I had already learned the difference. By the end of the second week, the house no longer felt like a home. It felt like a waiting room. Every conversation revolved around problems that should never have existed in the first place. Bills piled up on the kitchen counter. Collection notices appeared in the mailbox almost daily. The silence between phone calls had become so rare that even a few quiet minutes felt unnatural. No one laughed anymore. Especially Logan and Ethan. For years, they had moved through life believing that every bad decision came with an invisible eraser. Someone would smooth things over. Someone would make a call. Someone would write a check. That someone had always been me. Now they were discovering what happened when the eraser disappeared. Logan spent every morning filling out applications, only to learn that his reputation had followed him farther than he expected. Employers talked to one another. Missed shifts, broken promises, and constant excuses eventually became impossible to hide. One interview ended after less than 10 minutes. Another manager told him politely that they needed someone dependable. He came home furious. "They're treating me like I'm some criminal." I looked up from my book. "No," I answered calmly. "They're treating you like your own history." He glared at me. "You could fix this." "I could." "Then why won't you?" "Because it isn't my mistake." Those words landed harder than I expected. He turned away without another sentence. For the first time since I'd known him, he had no argument. Meanwhile, Ethan's situation became worse. Without insurance, every repair came directly out of his pocket. The estimate for fixing his car was higher than the vehicle itself was worth. The bank refused another extension. The towing company added more storage fees every day. His phone rang constantly. Sometimes he answered. Usually he didn't. Ignoring reality had always been easier than confronting it. Until reality started leaving voicemails. One evening I walked into the garage and found him staring at the damaged car. He didn't notice me at first. He simply stood there, hands in his pockets, looking smaller than I had seen him in years. "I don't know what to do," he admitted quietly. The words surprised me. Not because they were honest. Because they were the first honest words I'd heard from him in a very long time. "You start by accepting that it's your responsibility," I said. He kept looking at the twisted hood. "That's it?" "No." He finally turned toward me. "Then what?" "Then you work." "I already work." "When you feel like it." His shoulders dropped. I continued. "You pick up extra shifts. You sell things you don't need. You make payments instead of excuses. You stop expecting rescue." He said nothing. Maybe because he knew I was right. Maybe because there was nothing left to deny. That night Logan knocked on my office door. He hadn't done that in years. "Can we talk?" I nodded. He sat across from me, avoiding eye contact. We were stupid. I waited. It was just a joke. There it was. The explanation everyone reaches for when truth becomes inconvenient. "A joke?" I asked. "Yeah. So explain it." He frowned. "What?" "Explain why it was funny." Silence. "You can't," I continued. "Because it wasn't humor. It was honesty spoken carelessly. We didn't think you'd hear it." "I know." He rubbed both hands together. "You took it too seriously." I leaned back. "No, Logan. I finally took it exactly as seriously as you meant it. He looked down. I said something stupid. You revealed what you believed. His voice became quieter. We didn't hate you. I never said you did. Then why are you doing this? Because respect is the minimum price of being a family. He stared at the floor. I've paid your fines. I've called lawyers. I've spoken to principals. I've convinced employers. I've stood beside you in police stations. I've spent thousands of dollars solving problems you created. I paused. Tell me one thing you've ever sacrificed for me. His lips parted. Nothing came out. Because there was no answer. A minute later, Hannah appeared in the doorway. She looked exhausted. I've been thinking, she said softly. Neither of us interrupted. I spent years believing I was protecting the boys. She swallowed. But I wasn't. I watched her carefully. I was protecting them from becoming adults. The sentence hung in the room. Heavy. Painfully true. They never learned consequences. She continued. Because every consequence disappeared before it reached them. Her eyes met mine. And you made that possible. I know. She nodded slowly. I let you. For several seconds no one spoke. Then Logan whispered something I had waited years to hear. I never realized how much you actually did. I believed he meant it. But understanding wasn't enough. Understanding came after the damage. Respect should have come long before it. The following weeks were different. Not easier. Different. Logan accepted a warehouse job that paid less than half of his previous position. Ethan sold his motorcycle to cover part of his debt. Neither complained much anymore. Reality had become a better teacher than I ever could have been. I didn't celebrate. I didn't feel victorious. Watching people you love struggle is never satisfying. But watching them finally stop running from responsibility. That was something else. For the first time since I married Hannah, I wasn't carrying the entire family alone. They were finally beginning to carry themselves. Looking back now, I understand that the turning point in our family wasn't the day I overheard those words in the garage. It was the day I stopped protecting everyone from themselves. For years I believed love meant preventing pain. I couldn't have been more wrong. Real love doesn't erase consequences. It prepares people to survive them. Months passed before life settled into something that resembled peace again. Not the comfortable peace we had before. That peace had been built on denial. This one was different. It was honest. Logan kept the warehouse job. He hated the early mornings. He hated the heavy lifting. He hated answering to supervisors who expected him to arrive on time every single day. But he kept showing up. Week after week. Month after month. For the first time in his adult life, he finished a full year with the same employer. Not because someone had rescued him. Because he finally understood that reliability isn't something another person can give you. It's something you choose. Ethan's road was slower. Selling his motorcycle covered only part of what he owed. He spent nearly every weekend working overtime, taking side jobs, repairing lawn equipment, replacing brakes for neighbors, doing whatever honest work he could find. Little by little, the debt shrank. Every payment came from his own hands. Every receipt carried a lesson no lecture could have taught. Hannah changed too. One evening she sat beside me on the back porch after dinner. The sunset painted the yard in shades of orange and gold. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. Finally she broke the silence. I owe you an apology. I looked at her. For what? For believing you were the problem. She folded her hands together. When the boys started struggling, I blamed you. She shook her head slowly. But they weren't suffering because you stopped helping. They were suffering because they never learned how to help themselves. I didn't answer immediately. The evening breeze carried the smell of fresh-cut grass across the yard. I should have backed you up years ago, she continued. I kept asking you to save them because it was easier than making them grow. There wasn't much left to say. Apologies can't rewrite the past. But they can acknowledge it. Sometimes that's enough to begin again. A few days later, Logan knocked on my workshop door. He was holding a small envelope. "I wanted you to have this." Inside was a check. It wasn't large. Not even close to what I had spent over the years. The amount didn't matter. "What is it?" I asked. He looked embarrassed. "The first payment." "For what?" "For everything I'll probably never be able to repay." I smiled faintly and handed it back. "I don't want your money." "I owe you?" "No." He frowned. "You owe yourself." He looked confused. "You spent years believing someone else would always fix your life." I rested a hand on the workbench. "If you've stopped believing that, you've already paid me back." For a long moment neither of us moved. Then he nodded. Not quickly. Not dramatically. Just once. Like a man accepting something he wished he had understood years earlier. Later that week, Ethan surprised me even more. He walked into the garage carrying a toolbox I had bought him when he was 16. It was scratched now. Covered with grease. Used instead of forgotten. "I finally get why you taught me all this," he said. I raised an eyebrow. "I thought it was about fixing cars." He smiled awkwardly. "It wasn't. No. It was about fixing my own problems." I couldn't help smiling. "Exactly." There were no emotional speeches. No dramatic hugs. Life rarely works that way. Respect returned quietly. One decision at a time. One responsibility at a time. One earned lesson after another. People often assume my story ends with revenge. It doesn't. Revenge would have been watching everything collapse and enjoying it. I never enjoyed watching them struggle. I simply refused to keep standing between them and the consequences they had earned. There is an important difference. The greatest change wasn't in Logan. Or Ethan. Or even Hannah. It was in me. I stopped measuring my worth by how many disasters I could clean up. I stopped believing that endless sacrifice automatically creates gratitude. Most importantly, I learned that self-respect is not selfish. It's necessary. The day I stopped rescuing people who openly disrespected me wasn't the day I abandoned my family. It was the day I finally gave them the opportunity to become one. Because families aren't built on unlimited second chances. They're built on accountability. On honesty. On respect. Without those things, love eventually becomes obligation. And obligation eventually becomes resentment. I carried that resentment for years without admitting it. I won't carry it again. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is step aside and allow life to teach the lesson you no longer can. That lesson changed Logan. It changed Ethan. It changed Hannah. Most of all, it changed me. So I'll leave you with the same question I asked myself countless times after that afternoon in the garage. If the people you sacrificed everything for laughed at your devotion when they thought you couldn't hear them, would you have kept rescuing them? Or would you have finally chosen self-respect instead?